Okay, fantastic. I am here today with Marcy DeVries. She is the CEO of Fraud Sniffer, a company that helps employers detect and prevent fraud through social media analytics and investigative AI. Marcy's a repeat entrepreneur, a data-driven strategist, and a passionate advocate for truth and transparency in the digital age. Marcy, welcome to the Decision Room.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. So thanks for bearing with my tech challenges. I still am a little bit of a newbie on this platform, so thanks for your patience.
It's always challenging.
Too many platforms. So, you have a really interesting background. So maybe we could just start there and what drew you into the world of fraud detection and analytics.
Right. So throughout my career, I used to be in marketing. I started in marketing, and that turned out to be very data-driven, also very exciting. But after the acquisition of my first set of companies, I was presented with the opportunity to start using what I had learned about analytics and discovery in marketing for fraud investigation. And what was interesting to me about this new field is that you could take this sort of intersection of data and online content and put it into something a little more practical than marketing. Let's start piecing together, why these injuries aren't resolving. Is there a connection between the different people whose injuries aren't resolving? How can we take something that's as simple as, this person was injured on this date and he's not recovering. How do we put color on that and make it actionable for our clients?
Got it.
Yeah.
And so what was the kind of tipping point to say, there's a company here and I'd like to go build it?
The tipping point for us was when we did our industry research, and this was 13 years ago, and we realized that this sort of field, first of all, there was very little being done in social media. We were essentially pioneers at that point. But also just the investigation field was very fragmented. There was no 10,000-pound gorilla to defeat, and in that kind of a marketplace, there's a tremendous opportunity. Furthermore, we saw that most of the people in our field were viewed as commodity players. So you get an investigation from this guy, you get an investigation from that guy, it's all the same. So that gave us an opportunity to create and deliver a premier sort of white glove experience, like a premium product for the marketplace, which has been very successful for us.
So maybe you could just elaborate for those who are unfamiliar with Fraud Sniffer, the sort of, you alluded to social media, real-time data, and what does it really mean to provide a white glove service like you described?
Sure. So many of our competitors offer a 3-hour product where they'll put an investigator on your file for 3 hours and they'll snip things and record them in a PDF. And at the end of 3 hours, that's what you get. Fraud Sniffer takes a different approach where we don't stop working until the project is complete. Our investigators work hand in hand with adjusters. They work with attorneys. They'll take multiple phone calls on any specific matter to help resolve it. So for instance, if we send an investigator out, or if we have social media findings that are difficult to understand, our team will consult with the client, whether it's an attorney or an adjuster, to help them fully understand the results. And all of our content is stored inside of our own data warehouse. So if plaintiff's counsel gets involved and a social media profile gets shut down, we have all of the content, including all the metadata, stored safely in our system so that there can't be any loss of data once it's been captured by our team. We also help the council and adjusters to work with the data inside of our repository so they can build customized reports. They can do data mining inside of our system. We have AI that tags what's in the photos. So if there is content, that we describe about the photos, but the AI picks up a different tag, the data can still be harvested using customized searching. We really wanted to take what is in the marketplace, just a PDF handoff delivery, and turn it into an investigative tool for an ongoing relationship with our clients.
So what kind of organizations are finding the most value from your solution? Because I know, like in the insurance industry, there's folks who are selling at the carrier level and I think doing some data solutions and fraud detection solutions at very large scale. And how would you kind of compare and contrast what you're doing? Because this sounds a bit different.
It is different. The fraud investigations that's taking place enterprise-wide at carriers is often about financial fraud or employee fraud or provider fraud. So billing review, that's the nature of it. Ours is more related to specific claims in that most claims resolve without an issue. And we don't want to, and we don't need to get involved with those. The ones that we get involved with are the ones that are headed toward that nuclear verdict or that's headed toward, a perm total loss in the states that allow perm total losses. Those are the ones where our value is realized to the greatest extent. So typically, if we're going to work with a carrier, we come in through their legal counsel because counsel has a little bit more flexibility to get that better tool. We also work with carriers as like a supplement to their SIU. Their SIU internal is fantastic up to a certain point. And then if the case continues after their SIU has exhausted their methods, then it comes to us for an additional leg up.
Got it. Yeah. And so, 13 years ago, obviously there were people working in AI broadly defined, but I think you talk about being on the edge of investigative AI, and so, what role does AI play in how you operate and deliver results, and how has that evolved over the decade plus?
Sure. So AI, before the last couple of years, when all the big AI announcements were made, AI was primarily used in searching and locating claimants, using the AI that was present in Google and whatnot. That's kind of old news by now. What we are using it for currently, and really it's still in testing phase, is to identify elements of photos, identify things that appear in a video so you don't have to watch the whole video, things that are consistent through a report. And we also use it to mine all of the reports we've ever done to see if there's any association between different claimants across different carriers. Because what you'll see is some claimants have relatives in other states. And this one family group all of a sudden is having a bunch of swoop and squat accidents with semi-trucks. We can piece that together using these systems, and then we report it to the carriers anonymized. So we don't give the claim information, but we let them know that there's a ring forming, and then they can get their counsel in to manage it from there. That's really where we see AI giving us the most boost, because we have 25,000 files in our system, and we have, a couple million entries against those files. So it's a lot of data. We can't parse it by hand, but there are insights in there that can be very valuable.
And And so if you're trying to do some level of real-time data processing and analysis of digital footprints and things like that, how do you do that without AI or with the sort of more limited forms of AI you were describing? And well, maybe let's just start there.
So locating a claimant, the AI is not quite there yet. So we continue to test it. There's a system called Face Match, where if you put your face in, it'll give you a couple of pretty good matches. That's an AI solution based on facial recognition. But what we're finding is you get a couple correct matches and then a whole bunch of incorrect matches. And you have to have already correctly identified your person of interest before you can start using these tools. And a lot of the solutions that use AI to locate your claimant or your plaintiff right now are relying on these solutions that provide a true target, maybe, plus a whole bunch of other people. So then when the result comes into the adjuster or the attorney, they're still at zero because they don't know which one of those pictures is the right person. So it's getting there, though. It's a lot better than it was a couple years ago, and the solutions keep getting better. But it's not a click and find solution yet. That just doesn't exist in the marketplace.
So when you talk about being an advocate for, truth and transparency, what, where do you feel like we are today on that spectrum? And then also kind of how does, data privacy and those issues come into play with that?
So truth and transparency I guess that is kind of a multi-pronged question, right? Because truth and transparency, as far as our relationship with our clients, includes us telling the truth about where we are with AI. And there's a lot of non-transparency there in the marketplace. The other place that we believe in transparency is in our reporting to our customers after the file has been processed, where if there's no findings, we tell them that there's no findings. Or if the finding is good, but it supports the other person's position, we still provide the data. We don't feel that it's appropriate or correct or transparent to give some of the information in order to support a point of view.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what about the data privacy piece? How do you see that working in this segment of the industry?
Data privacy is a big deal. You can really affect people's lives using the data that we record. So ethically, we don't work with family law, anything where it's a non-critical situation. Anytime someone just wants us to look at their daughter's boyfriend, we'll never do that because it's not appropriate. Like, they have the right to privacy at that point. With claimants and plaintiffs, we do not defeat privacy settings by law. We can't do it. It's not allowed. We do look at all of their relatives, and often there's content that the individual person might have had on private, but their relatives have public. That still counts as public information, and we do record that. But we feel like, once the matter is resolved, the matter should disappear from our system and disappear for that person so it can't be reopened.
So how does that kind of play into the millions of records you have and that ability to do analysis and those things?
So with our GDPR compliance, if a record is requested to be deleted, we delete it. There are other records where we're on the hook to preserve it. So when we are in preserving mode, we preserve it at the request of our customers. And if we need to delete it, we delete it at the request of our customers. That still leaves a large percentage of working files. That leaves a lot of data still open. because we're working on a lot of files at the same time. And the more work that we do concurrently, the greater the findings are that are available to our customers.
So were there particular lessons from your previous businesses that you brought to the founding of Fraud Sniffer and the way you've approached building the business?
Yep. Getting the finances straight is the biggest challenge for anybody who's starting their business, and making sure that they have their accounting straight. The other piece of it is to understand the balance between operations and sales. And if you don't have a correct operations procedure, you can have as many sales as you want to, and it's not going to help you. And vice versa. If you have a ton of, if you have, they both need to work in hand, and they both need to be super effective. The other piece of it is innovation. If you are going into a marketplace and you're trying to disrupt it, you can't show up and disrupt it if you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. Even if it doesn't feel like a tremendous difference, it still has to be different, and it has to be marketed in a way that's disruptive.
And so did you bring particular lessons learned from your marketing background to do this?
Yeah. Understanding that we had to be, and building the Fraud Sniffer system is our real differentiator. So from a marketing perspective, going into social media research and social media investigation, we realized very quickly that just having the PDF that everybody else had was not going to differentiate ourselves. So in order to have a real compelling story to tell, and in order to really change the way that investigation is done, we had to build this system.
Got it. And so how did you sort of do the work to test for product market fit and those sorts of things?
Well, luckily, I did have a pretty good graphic user interface design background. So the initial wireframing, the way that the system works, turned out to be about 80% right on the nose. We haven't had to make a lot of adjustments since then. So that's where some prior experience really came in handy. But over time, we've made a lot of modifications in terms of permissions, data privacy, security, and then also because social media has changed so much, we had to add a lot of capacity for storing videos and sharing videos.
Is there a particular, either in this business or one of your prior ones, is there a particular leadership decision you've had to make under pressure that still shapes how you lead today?
Yeah. It actually wasn't. It was when I was teaching at Johns Hopkins University between companies. It was supposed to be a hobby job for me. And those kids really put me through the ringer. After the first semester that I taught, the responses came in, and they were unanimous that they said, "Who does this lady think that she is?" And learning the lesson, having a little bit of humility and a lot of humanity as you approach working with your teams and building your systems. That's been the most important lesson for me.
Do you have a point of view? I mean, as someone who works with technology and at the edges of AI, seeing, the evolution of AI, kind of the most critical skills for a leader right now in this kind of more and more tech-driven, pressure packed world we're in?
Yeah. Keeping your ears on and not leading with fear, because the messaging around AI is real, it's progress plus fear. There is a path in there, but you have to be very smart about how your company would engage with AI. It's already coming. It's part of your Outlook software now. It's already part of most lawyers' tech stack. Some insurance companies are requiring that their briefs are written by AI just for cost savings. So it's already here. We have to be careful of whether or not your data goes back into the learning model. Number one, most critical. And number two, that the results that you're getting are actually accurate. What I found with AI is that AI is really effective when you have the capacity to be delighted by the results. And by that, I mean, you're not asking it to do a specific thing where you know what the answer is and you're asking it to find the answer. It's terrible at that. If you're asking it to create something that you don't want to create and you don't really have a horse in the game about how it turns out, AI is amazing. Job description writing, brief writing, resume writing, description writing, summaries, all of those things that people hate doing, AI is magical. It's fantastic. But when you need to be really critically correct and you have this fact pattern and you need to describe this fact pattern accurately, AI usually throws in a couple of mistakes. So you have to be really vigilant and open-minded. AI is going to be eventually at the point where it doesn't make those mistakes. Hopefully, fingers and toes crossed, because that would be fantastic. But it doesn't seem at this point where you can keep it out of your company. And we have had at least one customer at the carrier level request that we do not use any AI at all in any of our solutions on their work. And that is possible, and we're doing that, but it seems short-sighted on their part. Instead of taking the time to learn how the AI is working, they just said no to it, and that's probably not sustainable as a way of viewing AI.
Do you think that was because of like some of the third-party AI regulation that's proposed, and they're wanting to see how that plays out more first, or something different?
It could be. I think they were concerned about the level of AI that might be used, that they would wind up in the LLM, where the data that they give to us to search for their claimants might wind up in the language model. And I mean, honestly, I would be afraid of that as well if I was handing over sensitive information like that. It's an important question to have answered before you work with an AI enabled vendor.
How did you approach assembling your team, and how's it evolved since you started the business?
Well, because we started from scratch, our first round of hiring was friends and family, which is always fraught. But we started making partnerships with universities, and we started building a career path for criminal justice majors who were coming out of school but didn't want to be a police officer, and they weren't going to get a security clearance. So they come and work for us right out of school. We give them all of our proprietary training, and that has been really successful for us.
What about for sort of more senior roles and things like that, as you try to think about product roadmap or try to think about go-to-market strategies and other things like that?
Yep. So a lot of that, our management right now is all homegrown. So management typically at this point is on the operations side. We've just started doing some road mapping and planning on the sales side. So that's been pretty interesting. We've been able to take some salespeople from surrounding businesses and use their external learning to help do that. As far as product roadmap, we work very closely with our customers, and the customers tend to provide that roadmap for us in development at this point. We do see at some point we'll need to do, more proactive development. At that point, we will hire against it, but we have not quite reached that spot yet.
Whether it's in Fraud Sniffer or your other previous businesses, is there a particular role or a particular type of role you've found challenging to fill?
Effective sales roles, those are very challenging. Also, a really good HR person is very difficult to find. A lot of new graduates are happy to give us their 4-year education stab at it, but they don't really know the intricacies of it and working with a payroll provider, all those things. So those are the two areas that are particularly challenging for us.
Have you found ways to sort of make the HR role more strategic versus administrative?
We have not. I would like to hear more about that.
Okay. Well, I know we're coming up on time here, but maybe that's something we could follow up on. But I think that there are organizations where, unfortunately, HR is sort of still perceived as, oh, if HR is walking down the hall, I better go hide because something bad's happening. And that's a very, old school, or it's a purely administrative function. And, I think, in my opinion, everyone working in a business should understand how their role fits strategically into the organization, what the business strategy is overall, and then how their role fits into it. And I think sometimes HR is just handed tasks and not brought into that process. And I think, to your point, effective HR leaders can help bring a different lens to strategy and help folks like yourself in thinking through the future of the business and then aligning the organization to meet that both in the short run and the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So, Marcy, anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up today?
Just that I am very happy to be on the show with you. And Fraud Sniffer is growing and expanding in a number of different ways. So I'm sure your audience will be hearing about us fairly soon.
Oh, that's great. Well, Marcy DeVries, CEO of Fraud Sniffer, thanks so much for joining the Decision Room.
For sure. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.